Welcome to the next video in my Azure Active Directory Identity series, and we're going to talk about accelerate the adoption of your apps. Now, this is the fourth pillar in the Azure Active Directory architecture, if you will. Now, when I talk about building identity-connected applications and accelerating the adoption of the app, we're really talking about a developer experience. And so with the developer platform, with Azure Active Directory, developers and ISVs out there can use it to start to build an identity connected app. And those apps can be enterprise ready. Using Azure Active Directory as the control plane and as an identity platform to build your app, you can then ensure that the application is enterprise ready. Applications can then better comply with IT policies, security, and compliance requirements. And then being able to protect the app and the users. The app can benefit from built-in security features that come with Azure Active Directory, like multi-factor authentication, identity protection, conditional access, single sign-on, so on and so forth. And then it's differentiated. Integrating with Azure Active Directory allows you to enrich the app by securely accessing the user data in your APIs or in the Microsoft Graph. And by the way, the Microsoft Graph enables developers to create apps and services and workflows based on data in Microsoft 365, including identity and access management APIs. So that's pretty cool. So even things like data and teams, that gives me a ton of ideas. Now, from a platform standpoint, Azure Active Directory is, again, that single one platform to sign in. And it can use identities in Azure AD, or it could use personal accounts like Google IDs and Facebook IDs and Microsoft accounts. But it could also use things like on-premises Active Directory as well. But again, it's that single control plane. Now, the developers out there, they have the choice to be able to have a single portal to register all of their apps that can sign in with any of these identities. They can have one set of libraries and SDKs that they can use to sign in. And from an endpoint perspective, they have one endpoint that is standards compliant that sign in any Microsoft identity, which allows compatibility with third-party libraries. Now, there's a few common scenarios that developers are leveraging Azure Active Directory with. And one of the common scenarios is through authentication and sign-in. And that's, as I mentioned earlier, by using Azure AD to authenticate, you can then, with companies as their identity system, you can then, as a developer, have one less password that you need to store and protect. And we can handle that authentication in Azure AD and handle the sign-in and the password reset and all the access controls for you and the customer who use Azure AD, so you can focus on building the application. And that enables things like single sign-on. And so Azure AD enables, again, easy integration to many of today's popular SaaS apps that are out there. It enables users to single sign-on to apps directly or discover and launch them from an application portal like Office 365 or the My Apps portal. And SSO means giving the customer the ability to access all of the apps and resources that they need to do business by signing in just once. And once they're signed in, they can then authenticate seamlessly to those other apps. Now, the second scenario here is around user provisioning. So not only do users have to manage multiple sets of username and passwords, those applications that they access can automatically be provisioned or deprovisioned through this lifecycle management. And that's a big deal because Azure Active Directory introduces the ability to do security and access governance controls that enable you to essentially manage that user's identity to these apps. And then using things like SCIM, you can do automatic user provisioning. So more on that in another video. And then the last thing here is around the Microsoft Graph. And again, being able to connect your app to the Microsoft Graph to get even more smarts in it and access to more data, like data in Office 365 or Teams, like I mentioned, across the board. So that's pretty interesting. Now, I mentioned app discovery. And so once your app has been integrated with Azure Active Directory, it can be discovered across several different areas. And so IT admins can discover your app within the Azure portal. They can then go out and publish it for specific users and groups of users. Now, if you're an ISV, your app can then be eligible to be listed in the Azure AD App Gallery that's in Azure, kind of like the marketplace, if you will. And then the application is also eligible to be discovered in Office 365 on the App Launcher. And so that's really interesting as well. And here you can see some examples of what that looks like. Now, the Microsoft Graph again, it's really important. And so building and integrating with Azure Active Directory enables you to leverage that data in the graph. And so it's best to think of the graph as an API gateway that unifies the many REST API offerings that Microsoft has. And so Microsoft Graph brings together a wide variety of endpoints. I think there's like over 25 APIs here, including Azure Active Directory and productivity APIs like Exchange Online and OneDrive and Teams and security and Intune and all sorts of other stuff, even cloud printing. And so naturally, Microsoft Identity and Azure Active Directory is the control plane for the Microsoft Graph. And so by integrating with Azure AD, you can better understand who and how people are utilizing your app. And then that allows you to integrate with the rest of the ecosystem here. So again, you're getting rich context for your app, you're getting deep insights into your app, and you're getting real-time updates. Okay, so to close things out here, you can build any kind of application on top of the graph. And some of those examples include web and device native apps, but also bots. And all kinds of new different application types are popping up every day. And all the way to the background processes and daemon services that are running business workflows behind the scenes. Now, those apps and services leverage this wide, rich data set from Microsoft 365 and from the graph. And thanks to the graph service, which directs the calls to the right source, the developer does not need to know where to go exactly and where the data lives. So that's really useful. And the graph also aggregates calls for efficiency and allows you to fine-tune performance and all sorts of different things. So when you have to develop an app, whether it's a legacy line of business app within the environment, you're developing an app for your customers to access, maybe it's just an app that your company is going to use, whatever it may be, consider using Azure Active Directory as an identity provider for that app because it integrates directly with the rest of the enterprise and everything else that you're doing. But it allows you to have a whole new set of controls around it, and it's going to make your life a little bit easier from an identity lifecycle perspective. Okay, hope you found value in this. This is the last video here of my PowerPoint deck. The next video is where we're going to start diving deeper into the technology, doing some demos, and really getting technical on some of these concepts I talked over in the last video with you. Okay, folks, hope you enjoyed this. Let me know in the comments below, and we will see you in the next video. Take care.